All right, I hope you brought your notes. It's the final week of the month. You know what that means? It's style study time. Oh man, it's been so long since I've done a proper style study, so I'm really excited for today's video. And today's style study is extra special because today we're actually going to do it together. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, last week I put up a video explaining exactly how I do my style studies, and towards the end of that video I revealed this week's feature artist, and I said you guys could go away and make your own notes, and in today's video we can compare our notes. Now if you've done that, well done, I'm so proud of you. If you haven't done that, well, this time I'll allow it, but the next time you refuse to participate, I'll set my dog on you. He's vicious. Today we're taking a look at the work of incredible portrait artist Laura H Rubin, and this is an artist I've been following for about a year since the very first request came in. So massive thank you to Mari Roldan, Jerry Wonder and Sandwich for requesting this video. I hope you guys enjoy it and that it's everything you've been looking for. If you're a style study veteran, you can head on to part 1, the timestamps are in the video description below. But if you're new here, hi, welcome. I am so glad you're here because today we're going to level up your art. Style study is a regular series we do here on my channel, well, regular-ish, where we take a look at some of our favorite contemporary artists, analyze their work, and see what we can learn from it. Keyword learn. We're here to learn from that style, not to copy or plagiarize someone else's work. I like to structure my style studies in 3 parts. In part 1, we'll take a look at Laura's work, analyze her style, and see what we can learn from it. Part 2 will be a study of one of her original paintings. The beautiful reference I've chosen today is this one. And in part 3, we'll apply everything that we learned today to an original painting of our own. And like I said in last week's video, if you find that there are some important features to Laura's art that I have completely missed out, please do take a second to leave it in a comment below. I would love the opportunity to learn from your findings too. As always, please remember to like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out so much. But without much further ado, grab a snack, sit back, and let's dive into another style study featuring Laura H Rubin. Laura H Rubin is a digital portrait artist from Thun, Switzerland, who specializes in these dark, emotive portraits that are packed with story and expression. Although she went to school for film and VFX, in her beautiful Bazaar interview, Laura mentioned how there weren't very many job prospects for film in Switzerland, and although she worked in advertising and photography for a bit, she eventually switched to painting full-time. In the same interview, she mentioned how to her, painting is like writing a diary, and that through her characters, she's able to process a lot of emotion. As a result, all of Laura's art has very deeply emotional and expressive themes. This beautiful body of work has garnered her over 732,000 followers on Instagram and over 21,000 subscribers here on YouTube. I'd categorize Laura's art as dark, dramatic portraits with melancholy overtones. It is almost always a close-up or a three-quarter portrait, and while the subject may vary, the majority of her art is based on female characters. Laura mentioned in the same interview how she feels that in this day and age, we as a society are lonelier than ever, and pretty much never take the time out to check in on each other's emotional well-being. And this is why she puts the characters' expression at the forefront of every painting, and honestly it works like a charm. You can't tell me you don't first notice the expression on the character's face before noticing all the other details. And today we're going to take a look at all the details and how, funnily enough, they serve to further push that expression, because it is the surreal details that really punch up the painting, taking it way beyond the realm of realism. I guess we can say when it comes to telling stories, Laura is a bit of a supernaturalist. Speaking of lists, take yours out now and let's look at 5 key characteristics to Laura H Rubin's art. Okay, let's lay to rest the elephant in the room. Everything is flat and dark except for the face and the hands. In fact, you'll find that in a lot of her work, either the hair is flat and black, or the torso is, or both are. It almost looks like she wants the face and hands to stand out while everything else is flat and in the background, almost as if the character's face and hands were emerging out of the shadows. You may occasionally have a floral print on the torso, but if you look at the print itself, while it is absolutely gorgeous, doesn't it remind you of maybe a printed wallpaper? As if the body is literally blending into the background. To me, this separation of rendering techniques between the body and the face and hands serves a very important purpose, and that is to force our focus to be on the expression. Obviously, the facial expression is often very noticeably hurt or upset or dark, but I'm talking about expression in a metaphorical sense. All of the details that are visible and rendered realistically seems to be elements of individualistic expression. Here, for instance, the horns are an important attribute that define this character, and they are well rendered. Here you have the blue fingernails that match what looks like the blue blood coming out of her nose, and here you see her entire outfit, antlers, and the raven rendered visibly and realistically. Everything that is essential and expressive is rendered fully, while everything that doesn't add to the expression is flattened out. Let's look a little closer at the flat areas. I just said that everything that doesn't add to the expression is flattened out, but that doesn't mean that all flat areas are just filler, because a massively crucial part of Laura's work is her use of silhouette. You'll often see that she uses the silhouette to add a lot of movement to the hair by creating these long, flowy strand details. These help to really break up the bigger shapes, and we already know from all of our style studies so far that smaller shapes add dynamism and much needed noise to zones of a painting that might be too quiet and dull. However, the silhouette serves another purpose too, and that is to tell even more of the story. You'll see that a lot of Laura's paintings contain crucial design elements carved into the silhouette. So here you have a camera, which is a pretty important part of this character's story. Here we see some antlers and a blindfold, which gives me very oracle vibes. And here we see an axe, a scythe, a weapon with several blades, which tells us that she is a fighter. The point is, just because a part of a painting is flat and black doesn't mean it is dead space. Laura uses the flat areas just as she uses the realistically rendered areas. They all work together to tell the character's story. There is one word to describe the facial features Laura paints, and that is realistic. Looking at the shape, sizing, and position of the facial features, there is nothing in there that is too extremely stylized. So the eyes are roughly halfway down the head and about an eye's width apart. The nose and lips are pretty realistic, as is the skin. There are, however, some interesting similarities across a lot of Laura's art. First, the eyebrows are generally quite structured with a high arch and a downward slant towards the inside, creating a frown that can be subtle or overt. The lips are usually textured but glossy, almost like the character is constantly biting or licking at them. The hair tends to be quite wispy, almost like it's thinning out at the ends. The skin has texture and, more often than not, a few moles or freckles here and there. All of this together creates a feeling that can only be described as harsh reality. Here's what I mean. It is no secret that Laura's work is generally centered around dark, melancholic themes. In fact, her book is literally called Melancholia. And while we've all felt a bout of depression at some point, I feel like in pop culture, these themes have been romanticized to a point where, ironic as it is, depression has been attributed to these perfect people with flawless skin who sit around in flannel pajamas and drink hot chocolate and write their diaries until one day they just magically feel a lot better. And if you ask anyone who has actually been through long bouts of it, you'll learn that that picture perfect image of depression description is so far from the truth. So when Laura adds these quote imperfections, such as textured skin, chapped lips, shadowy eye sockets and bags, and just an overall gaunt zombie-like expression, I find that it is so much closer to my actual experience with depression. That's not to say these characters are not conventionally attractive, of course they are, but it isn't the teen magazine airbrushed kind of beauty, but a more subtle, believable appeal that you would see in real life. And another very important detail is that in most of these portraits, the characters look directly at you. This is incredibly striking because we are biologically programmed to sit up and pay attention when someone is looking at us. But since these faces hold so much raw emotion, it is twice as striking because it almost feels like they're sharing this emotion with us, making us feel like we have a close bond with the characters since they're being so vulnerable and open with us. Boom. Instant connection. Before we dive into the saturated colors, I want to take a moment to talk about the face paint. In a lot of her work, you'll see that Laura paints some sort of dark shape, either as a stripe down the center of the lower lip and chin, or a blanket darkness from the lower lip all the way down the body. At first, I thought it was just a nod to tribal face paint and served to make the character look more folkloric, and I was gonna leave it at that, but, and this is super weird, I was painting the study when the thought hit me, there is so much more to this face paint. Think of the last time you used face paint or makeup. What effect does it have when you place a darker tone somewhere? It causes the area to sink deeper and disappear into the shadow, right? Now, think of what the mouth represents. Speech, opinion, perhaps even a metaphorical voice. So could it be that by painting the lower lip and jaw and everything from there on down black, she's expressing a narrative around having her voice disappear or maybe even invalidated? Just some food for thought, but let's take a look at some of the vibrant colors now. Looking at the skin that has been rendered, you'll see that while it does look like skin, there is a lot of redness around the eyes and the bulb of the nose, as well as in the mouth, whereas the rest of the skin is relatively pale and desaturated. Think about when that happens to your own face. When do you get red-rimmed eyes and a blotchy nose? That's right, it's when you cry. And you'll see that the reds around the eyes are actually very dark, verging on a dark violet, almost like the eyes have been rubbed at constantly, creating bruising there. Then you have some serious bags under the eyes, which lines up, and you have very glossy, almost watery eyes. In other words, the characters look like they've been captured in a photo just moments after an emotional breakdown. Obviously, you can draw your own conclusions about the story here, but I really just wanted to point out how all these subtle details come together to help you create a subconscious image of the emotions in each painting. You don't always need to paint actual tears to show that a character has been crying. And finally, let's look at some of the design elements that don't have to do with the character's face. You'll find that there are loads of very detailed natural elements, but placed in very unnatural ways. So you'll see some feathers growing out of the skin of a character's face, or some wings growing out of their head, or maybe some gigantic flowers or antlers. Maybe even in some cases, the face cuts away to reveal feathers or flowers. Are these just fun design elements that make the character look otherworldly? Maybe, but hi, I'm Srish and I never take things on face value. To me, however, this feels more like the character taking solace in elements of nature. When you're really hurt and upset, especially when life gets way too complicated, sometimes it can be really helpful to come back to the simplicity of the earth and find some grounding around plants and birds and animals. I think it is instinctive for us, because think about the last time you were so tired and worn down, I'll bet you wanted to leave everything and go live in the mountains. Am I reading too much into this because I rarely go outside? Maybe, but like I said last week, that is the whole point of a style study, is to read really far into an art style and learn what it means to you. So this is my attempt at that exercise. But to quickly sum up part 1, here are 5 key characteristics to Laura Rubin's art. Number 1, the main priority in her work is to force you to A. sympathize with her characters and B. express deep, dark emotions. 2. While the face and hands are usually the only bits rendered realistically, the silhouette of the character contains some very important storytelling elements that are carved out of the shadows. Number 3, while the proportions of the face are realistic, Laura also makes sure to include a lot of very realistic textures and details that take these characters away from the picture-perfect image of depression in popular media. 4. The color placement suggests that the character has been crying. There is a lot of redness around the eyes and nose, and the eyes appear to be quite watery. And number 5, Laura includes a lot of elements of nature in very unnatural contexts, suggesting that the characters may seek comfort and peace in the earthly element, a struggle many of us understand. For our study today, this is the reference that I've chosen. It's called Olive, and it felt straightforward enough while still including all of the elements we saw in part 1. I started off with a super rough sketch, loads of construction lines, and then lowered the opacity before creating a much cleaner sketch on a new layer. This is the layer where I actually drew the silhouette element. Then using the Bezier Select tool, I selected around the silhouette and filled it in with just a base skin tone. Doesn't really matter what color, we're gonna paint over it anyway. This is just to give us a base shape so that we can clip other layers on top and paint within the lines. I then went about painting the face, well, the part of it that is rendered. And this doesn't look like the reference, and I was a little frustrated at first, but then I reminded myself to go to bed and trust the process the next morning. I also used the Bezier Select tool to flatten the black bits on a new layer, and with a line art brush that had the stabilizer on, I flicked in all the stray hair strands in the silhouette. When I came back the next day, I realized that her eye was way too large, so I selected and copied it to a new layer, then resized the eye and blended the edges. This is a great way, by the way, to resize things after you've rendered it, is to copy it to a new layer because it preserves the rest of the rendering underneath, so you only really need to blend the edges in and not have to fill in any empty gaps. And finally, it was time to go in and add details to the eyes, some specular highlights, more dimension to the skin, and so on. I went ahead and cleaned everything up, painted in the details in the silhouette, and smoothed out the brightest parts of the skin. I found that Laura places a lot of texture around the under eye area and pretty much no texture on the expanse of the inner cheek, so that was an interesting detail, almost as if the under eye is so crinkly from all the crying. But anyway, here is the finished painting, and honestly this is the process that made me fall head over heels in love with this style. The prompt for this week's original painting is Nightmare, which is quite apt, honestly. It seems to work well with this style. At first I wasn't sure of the pose. You'll see me do a set of construction lines and then delete the layer and do another set of them. I had a fair few references, and in this one case it seemed too overwhelming to have that many. Plus I did have to pause in order to gather the right references for the hand, and eventually got to putting down a proper sketch. I wanted a scattering of flowers by her legs, and the idea was to paint them red and also paint her abdominal area red as well. I then went in with the Bezier Select tool and created layers and layers of flats. Here we do want a tiny bit of dimension in the body, but the hair is going to be flat, maybe some dimension at the crown. So I did go a little lighter with the body just to make room for a bit of rendering. Since the face is generally painted realistically and the background is pretty much always white or light grey, we can go straight in and render the face to have basic tones and shadows. I did include some deep reds and purples around the eyes though, and a lot of warmth in the nose. What really stumped me here was the eyes, because it's been so long since I've painted realistic details in eyes. Guess this goes to show you how important practice is. Honestly, I do need to sit down and go over basic drills again, it's been way too long. Anyway, for the vast majority of the rendering process, I used a textured brush. This one's called Speed Painting Blocking Shape Textured, and it is from the David Revoy 2021 bundle. I'll leave a link to it below. If you're using Critter, I cannot recommend this set enough. But I found this brush in particular to be perfect because if you use a light hand, it creates some really nice texture, but you can press down harder to create a more flat effect. And this is amazing for Laura's style of skin because you can use the same brush to paint the textured bits and the smooth bits. I did adjust the color balance to make the highlights in the face a little less red and found that created way more balance in the colors. I added a bit of freckle and mole detail to the face, some blood running down the flowers, and did some final adjustments, and here is the finished original painting for this week, Nightmare. So there we have it, Laura H Rubin demystified. Did you catch all of these points? Did you catch some extra points that I've completely missed out? Please do let me know in a comment below, and that way we can all take away way more from this exercise. Massive thank you again to Mari Roldan, Jerry Wonder, and Sandwich for requesting this video. I hope you've enjoyed it and that it's been everything you've been looking for. And if the rest of you guys have enjoyed this video as well, then please do remember to like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out so much. I do have all of Laura's links in the video description on the very small off chance that you've somehow not seen her work before. But by the way, if there are any other artists you'd like a style study on, first check the style study playlist because chances are I've already covered them. But in case I haven't, then feel free to leave them in a comment below, or you can come leave a request on my Discord server. I'm literally on there every single day. Check out my Patreon for even more exclusive tutorials every single week, and come say hi on Instagram. All of the links are always in the video description below. But with all of that said, thank you so much for hanging out and doing this study with me today. I really hope you've enjoyed this fun little exercise as much as I have. Check out some more style studies up here, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye!